Ladies and gentlemen, this is your final boarding call for the good ship SS tomorrow.
Today on The Friendly Futurist is a user-friendly future, a cybersecure one. And welcome back. And on board today on the good ship SS Tomorrow, we have a very in-depth discussion about all things cybersecurity with the Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, from Synechron, Aaron Momin. And we have a discussion where cybersecurity is trending, where it's heading for the 2030s and beyond. And this is a really good interview. I quite like this one because every once in a while we get a guest and we go somewhat off script. And we have discussions about other concepts in cybersecurity like Zero Trust Architecture, also known as ZTA, if you're playing along in the United States, ZTA, and the concept around post-quantum encryption. And Aaron even hints about a concept of Q-Day. When is Q-Day? You'll have to find out in the main interview, which is coming up after the break. Welcome back to another episode, and we've got a very special guest. We've got Aaron Momin. He's from Synechron. He's the CISO, and we're going to talk about all things cybersecurity. I love continuing this series on cybersecurity. I think it's still very important as we move towards this friendly future of ours. And Aaron, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave, for having me. Really appreciate it. I'm really excited about this podcast.
Not excited as I am. So, as for my guests, can you just give us a quick rundown about your journey so far and start wherever you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Currently, I'm the global CISO and head of enterprise risk management for Synechron, but I've been in the industry for about 30 years. I began my career sort of in the late 90s, working as a consultant for then Coopers & Lybrand, which has now merged with Pricewaterhouse and PwC. But, I started out working on security. I've been working on security my entire career. But the bulk of my career, about 23 years, were spent in cybersecurity consulting. So I've done extensive work working with multinational companies across the globe, deploying security programs, implementing complex security architectures, helping with data protection and incident response. And so I've worn many different hats. And then I'd probably say for the almost near past decade, it's about 7+ years, let's say 8 years, I've been serving as a CISO. So now I'm a 2-time CISO and currently with Synechron. Prior to this, I was with a company called Certinia, which is a global ERP vendor. So that was a very interesting journey. But notably, I just wanted to mention that in about 2010, I had also held my own company. And so I started a practice on my own, focusing on data protection, which I found very interesting. It was thrilling to have your own company and kind of bring that to fruition. So you're really excited about the depth of experience that I bring to the table that can kind of guide this conversation.
Yeah, cool. Now, just take a little bit step back in case for those who don't know, because we're going to a global audience. What is Synechron's mission and how it's really positioning itself in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're about a 25-year-old company. We're at 15,000 employees and roughly about close to 60 offices across the globe. We're a global digital IT consulting company, and we help companies with transforming their IT roadmap, and we help companies modernize their infrastructure and applications and kind of leverage the power of the cloud to help companies deploy their technology programs. We specialize in innovation. We have a specialty called FinLabs, which has been around for about 10 years, but we allow for proof of concept and sandboxing of new technologies. So when we started FinLabs about 10 years ago, it started with blockchain when blockchain was kind of hot. And we've done a bunch of proof of concept. And today it's about AI and generative AI. And so in our FinLabs, we've created a bunch of prototypes, about 90 prototypes focused just on artificial intelligence that essentially helps our clients solve specific use cases or adjust specific use cases and business problems, and kind of obviously leveraging the power of AI to help them kind of achieve a means to an end. So we're really excited about the innovation that we bring to the table.
Yeah. And the next question is how can you describe your job to the average guy on the street?
Yeah, it's interesting. Historically, the CISO kind of, what was seen to be risen from the technology ranks, right? Working in network security and getting into, kind of IT security. But today, the CISO, and including my role, is involved in two sides of the coin, if you will, right? So one side of the coin is the CISO focused on making sure that, the organization that they work for stays out of the headlines, right? To make sure that we're doing what we can to prevent data breaches and taking a risk-based approach in terms of, addressing risks and threats and really protecting the organizational assets and their crown jewels, which is the data that they process and consume. So that's one side of the coin of a CISO, which is basically making sure that we're protecting and safeguarding data and keeping it out of the headlines. The other side of the coin of a CISO essentially is to be a business enabler. And it's really important and prudent for a CISO to have a seat at the table and have cross collaboration with the lines of business folks, with the CXO level, to make sure that as the organization is on their transformation and modernization journey, that the CISO is lockstep along with that, promoting, encouraging, and helping the business expand markets and their businesses and products, but more in a secure way of doing so. So that's the other side of the coin, which is a CISO is now evolved also into a business and kind of frontline facing role as well.
Okay, interesting. Now, what are some of the greatest cyber challenges organizations are facing for the first half of 2025?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, just by talking to a lot of my peers in the industry, doing a lot of research, reading, news articles and threat feeds. And, I'm kind of seeing, three themes for this first half of the year that are going into the latter part of this year, which is the first is around third-party risks. Third-party risks and threats are always present and always here, and they're not going away. As a lot of folks know, the majority of the data breaches do occur from third-party threats and third-party vulnerabilities that might give rise to security incidents. But companies continue to struggle with managing, third-party or supply chain risks, and to make sure that they're not introducing new threat vectors and attack vectors through the business partners that they work with. So that continues to be a struggle that a lot of CISOs are working through. The second one is ransomware. If you read some of the surveys in the past couple of years, there was a little bit of dip in ransomware attacks, not significantly, but certainly a dip. But this year, we're seeing an uptick again on ransomware. And maybe that's because the rise of generative AI, we're beginning to see attackers leverage generative AI to either craft specialized malware, or to craft very specialized and believable phishing emails that can dupe users. And so, we're seeing an uptick in ransomware, and certainly, ransomware is not going away. It's here to stay. And so that's the second kind of theme. And the third theme, which I touched upon just very briefly, is obviously generative AI. And so there's two sides of the coin for generative AI, which is, CISOs and security functions are beginning to test, pilot, and onboard projects where they can use AI for cybersecurity. So how can we leverage the power of AI to help and augment our security operations? But the other side of the coin with generative AI is obviously, how do we secure AI as the businesses, begin to consume AI more on a day-to-day basis? Whether known or unknown to folks, a lot of vendors and third-party providers are already incubating and embedding AI into their products and services. So, whether an organization approves or disapproves of AI, it's almost, an implicit kind of way of using it is that we're literally using it on a regular basis. So, how do we secure how we use AI? How do we protect the data that AI is, processing and consuming? And so that's the second part of that equation that a lot of CISOs are now struggling with is, also securing the AI that the business is using on a day-to-day basis.
I guess too, just a little bit off script here. It's not just a generative AI, but also have you seen sort of attacks molded with agentic AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of buzz and interest around agentic, right? So the transformation is that there was, artificial intelligence. Now there's generative AI, which is evolving into agentic AI, which is essentially, in simple words, they're agents, AI agents that are deployed across the enterprise, which do certain tasks. However, are autonomous. And so they can operate independently and take certain actions. So that's what the industry is evolving towards, because by deploying agentic AI or agents, it allows faster response time. It allows for quicker machine learning in terms of what's happening in the environment. And it allows the proactive detection and mitigation of cyber threats, at the door. So a lot of CISOs, including myself, are very interested in agentic AI. Certainly early days with agentic, but very promising in the near future.
Yeah, I just had to stress it's on the hype cycle. It's a big trend for 2025, so I just had to ask. So yeah, that's
Absolutely.
very interesting. Now, how important is it from your point of view to implement a top-down approach when building and maintaining an enterprise security system?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And when you talk to a lot of CISOs have mixed opinions, or generally speaking, in my experience and in my opinion, a lot of CISOs sort of take either a bottom-up or a middle-up approach. A top-down approach implies that, you have on board all of your C-level peers, you have the executive buy-in, and you have the board level sponsorship in terms of cyber, right? And we often hear the story about, cyber is now becoming an agenda at the board level, which is very true. And it really starts from there, is, making sure that you have your senior management and executive staff on board and consider cyber to be a business priority and a business risk that needs to be addressed. And no longer a technical issue, but a business issue that needs to be tended to. So I think, taking that kind of approach, having those conversations, collaborating with your CXO peers, getting those folks on board, evangelizing security internally within the organization is very important. The next piece is, once you have that kind of partnership and that friendship created with your CXO level, it's really important to understand, what are the key business risks that your peers are concerned about? What's on top of mind for them? What do they consider are the top threats? And what are we really trying to protect, right? Because I think that's the key issue is, I think you might agree, and I think a lot of folks listening might agree, which is, you can't protect everything, right? You just literally can't protect everything. There's way too much to protect. So you have to take a risk-based approach. But how do we do that? Well, the best way of doing that is by starting from the top and understanding what are the key business risks, what are the key security risks, what are the critical assets that we're actually trying to protect. And so getting that view from the top down is critical, because that gives you the lens of the business and what they perceive are the critical assets and the areas that need to be protected. And that can serve as one, not the only, but one large and critical input to help you create your security strategy and then to prioritize your investments and how you want to protect data. So having that top-down view goes without saying, but it's very important to make sure you carve out time and you build that in your DNA from a day-to-day basis, that you are partnering with the executives to essentially mitigate risk across the organization.
Yeah. Now, this could be more of a trickier question here, Aaron, because I'm in a country that has some of the biggest data breaches in the world, and often it is just a click on an email and stuff like that. So it's also on the balance it out sake to have a more bottom-up approach as well, to encourage people to think cyber first.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, I think it's the perfect marriage to have a top-down view, to understand your business risks and your key threat actors and your key assets. But you absolutely still need that bottom-up and middle-up approach, which means that first and foremost, you have to get full visibility of your threat landscape, right? You need to know what are the threats that are lurking in your environment, right? So the trouble is, a lot of CISOs don't have that full picture. They may have a partial picture, but not a full picture. So, bottom approaches typically imply that, you're getting that full visibility. You're gathering and harvesting all the data. And a lot of the data that you might capture might be voluminous, but you need to capture that data, because through that data, you can identify the signals, you can identify the red flags, you can identify the indicators of compromise. And then having that data will allow you to make more intelligent decisions to react to the cyber threat faster. So the bottom approach is also critical, but should be combined with a top-down view as well.
Now, I get a lot of fan mail from teachers who teach STEM subjects, and this probably is one of them. If you're a youngster and thinking about a career in cybersecurity, what's some good advice for them?
Yeah, no, I love that question, right? Because I spent my entire career working in, cybersecurity. And I think, the thing that I learned is that, cyber isn't just a monotone or a singular concept, right? It's multifaceted. Yeah. It's technical, it's managerial, it's risk-oriented, it's governance-oriented. There's a variety of different things that need to be addressed in cyber and in cybersecurity. And so my advice would be to, get on the journey, but try different areas, right? Try different areas of cyber that most interest you, where you are passionate about, where you think you can add value. So maybe a lot of folks, tend to gravitate towards ethical hacking because it sounds sexy and it sounds cool. and that's great, but that's not for everyone. And so I think it's good to try different things, but the underlying piece that I definitely encourage people is understand the technology architecture, understand, what is TCP/IP for the techies out there? How does the internet work? You may not be a technologist, but it's important, at least at a conceptual level, to understand how does the internet work? It runs on DNS. Well, what does that mean? Like, how do the systems function? So it's important to know the currency of cyber and how it works. So get educated on that. And the last thing I'll say on this aspect around just getting introduced to cyber is that it's not just only about cybersecurity. It's not just only about technical skills. A big piece to be successful in cyber is to know the business and to be able to speak the language of the business. So it's very important to spend time on refining your softer skills, but also taking courses that, kind of educate you and guide you and coach you around how do you engage with an executive? How do you walk through challenging environments? How do you do problem solving? Those types of soft skills, troubleshooting, engagement with different stakeholders, it's very important to spend time on, because otherwise, as you progress through your career, you may not be successful. However, if you do look at all these angles, I think it's a perfect recipe in the making to get into the cyber industry.
Fantastic. Now, of course, this podcast is about the future, and I know it's very hard to predict sometimes, but how do you envision the space cybersecurity in the 2030s and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, that's so intriguing because the industry is moving at such a, rapid pace, I can think of a variety of things, but I'd probably say, 3 or 4 things that come to my mind is, first and foremost, there's the continued expansion and explosion, rather, of interconnected devices on the internet. So, whether it's your TV, your refrigerator, your home router and such, these IoT devices, your laptops, your mobile devices, there's all a variety of systems connecting to the internet. So, but as we have proliferation and expansion of these devices, it also introduces, and widens the attack surface. So I think, 2030s and beyond is going to be more complex, hairier in terms of interconnecting all the devices, making sure that they're all secure and speaking that language. So I think, there'll be more to come on that, but certainly I see trending towards that direction. There continues to be a reliance on third parties and fourth parties, right? There's a big movement. A lot of folks have already migrated and transformed into the cloud using cloud service providers. And so, that's, and some might say that they've become over-reliant on cloud service providers and third-party providers. But I think that's certainly going to continue. That's not going to go away. You have some of the, force multipliers out there, so, some of the hyperscalers like AWS and Amazon and Salesforce. They will exist. They'll continue to expand their footprint. But I think, looking at, the security and the risk exposures, working with those third parties as you share your data to those third parties, I think that's going to continue. I think attackers will continue to target your third-party applications, your third-party cloud service providers. And so I think we need to continue to stay vigilant towards that. The other thing that comes to my mind is quantum, right? So post-quantum computing, I think that's kind of like an intriguing concept that a lot of people are researching. Post-quantum computing is not too far away, but it's not that close either. I mean, the estimates are roughly in the next 3 to 5 years, there could be something called Q Day, which is quantum day, which means commercial quantum computing would come online, would be live for commercial use. So we think, we think that Q Day is roughly between 3 to 5 years away, depending upon the trajectory and then the movement and the advancements we make year over year. But certainly post-quantum computing can certainly introduce new risks and threats. One in particular is called, that we're subject to today, is called harvest now, decrypt later, which is the encryption technologies today could be vulnerable to quantum attack, right? And that's the case what attackers are beginning to use. And I'll now stitch this back to our earlier conversation around ransomware, is that, there's some indicators or signals that there's an increase in ransomware, partially because of post-quantum computing that could be coming in the future. So if hackers are able to harvest your encrypted data now, keep it for ransom and hold on to it, they might be able to decrypt it 5 years down the road. And that is a very scary situation and scenario, right? So I think post-quantum computing and Q-Day is not futuristic. It's not here tomorrow either, but we certainly need to plan towards post-quantum computing, make sure that any encrypted data is also augmented by post-quantum computing algorithms, and we're securing against quantum attacks. So I think definitely by 2030 and beyond, that's going to be a formidable thing that, we'll have to contend with. And the last thing I'll say is, what goes without saying is AI. Obviously, as we talked about a little bit before, the industry is now moving towards agentic AI. I think that movement is starting now. It's still early days, but as, organizations get comfortable, as the technologies evolve and start to use agentic AI, it's going to be about using automation at scale. It's going to be about using agentic AI to respond to the threats in a much, much faster pace. I think that's where it's going. In my opinion, and I've said this before, in my opinion, speed is the new currency for cyber, which means you have to react to the cyber threat as quickly as possible. That could literally make or break an organization, right? So speed more than data. Data is the new currency, a lot of folks say, but in my opinion, speed is the new currency because, we have to respond to that cyber threat as quickly as possible. And certainly agentic AI, in my opinion, is going to be a key player. Certainly by the time we get to 2030, I think that's going to be a household technology implementation. And I think we're going to see a lot more coming out of there in the future.
Just quick off script here too. Where do you see the future, we'll say, with ZTA?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly, zero trust, continues to be a journey. I think, a lot of folks are going down that path. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's a journey.
Yeah.
I think it's a very complex implementation and concept, right? It's not just one project, but it's a concept that you're trying to deploy across the enterprise. But certainly zero trust is going to be the future as more and more organizations move towards centralized identity, never trust, always verified kind of model. I think it's definitely going to be a critical security pattern, let's call it that, a security pattern that has to be implemented to stay ahead of the cyber threat. So certainly ZTA, as they call it, zero trust architecture, zero trust, is absolutely going to be an area that everybody has to invest quite heavily on in the future.
Yeah. Now, before we wrap things up here, Aaron, I'm enjoying a conversation this morning. Is there anything I didn't ask but should?
Yeah, no, I think we touched on third-party risk management a little bit. I mean, I think I find that really intriguing. I would love to unpack that on a separate podcast. But I think, I think the industry is struggling a bit on third-party risk management because, today organizations, use a checklist approach by reviewing documents and questionnaires, a very manual and cumbersome approach. It's now being augmented by attack surface scanning vendors, right? These are vendors that scan a company from the outside, look for known or inherent vulnerabilities from the outside, and marry that to the third-party risks. So that's where we are today. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell the whole story. So I think we ought to probably spend more time, maybe that's a nice teaser for the next podcast, to kind of talk about where else can we invest around these third parties and fourth parties that we continuously and continually start to engage with. And I think that there's more to come on that story. Fantastic.
And that's it. That leaves a few breadcrumbs for a comeback. Absolutely. Now, finally, before we wrap things up, Aaron, where else can we find you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thanks for the offer there. Yeah, I'm primarily on LinkedIn. That's where I thrive. I have a dedicated LinkedIn group focused on enterprise rights management or digital rights management. But I also am a key contributor on LinkedIn. So certainly I'm there. For those that are somewhere around the New York City tri-state area, that's where I live. And so I attend a lot of the local security chapters, some of the what they call unconference, breaking away from the mega conferences. You have more of the low key, nondescript security conferences like the SummerCon that happens in New York City. I'm often at these conferences as well. So anybody who's around the New York tri-state area, I would love to, hopefully bump into one of you guys.
Fantastic. And I do get a lot of listeners from the US, so look out for Aaron. Aaron, thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And thanks for the conversation.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for listening. The Friendly Futurist is a Podcast West production and has been produced and edited by me, Dave Munn. If you love this show, please leave us a 5-star review on your favourite platform. That way it can help me grow. Until next time, friends, remember to stay curious and the future is user-friendly.
Another Podcasts West production.
This podcast is just for educational purposes and it's not financial advice. I'm not a financial planner or advisor. Please do your homework and seek professional help before you take on any adventures.